Yeah.
Game time. Okay, excellent. Okay. Good morning. I'm Aviva Edelstein, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us this morning. As we approach each holiday and milestone on the Jewish calendar, we on the Adult Education Committee consider which speakers to invite to shed new light and perspective on the events that we thought we knew. As we just blessed the month of Kislev yesterday and are approaching Hanukkah, reflections and hopes for miracles are on our minds. There are so many vantage points through which we can ponder these miracles, intellectually, philosophically, historically, as well as personally. We decided on this cold December morning, from the warmth and comfort of our own homes through Zoom, to invite you on a virtual tour with the renowned Shulie Mishkin of Alon Shvut, Israel. Several CBY members have shared with us over the years how inspired they have been from Shulie's tours, and so we decided to take this journey together to explore Hanukkah on a deeper and more expansive level. Shulie Mishkin holds a master's in Jewish history from Columbia University, and since completing the Ministry of Tourism Guide course, has been guiding professionally for the last 25 years. Through her guiding of people of all ages, Shulie aims to provide a complete picture of the land of Israel and Jewish heritage, with strong reliance on sources from the Bible to 19th century travelers' reports. Shulie also teaches Torah and text courses in various Jerusalem institutions, including Pardes and Matan, as well as provides tours for special needs students through the Darkinu program. Today, Shulie focuses on virtual tours, where, in her words, she brings Israel to the world and the world to Israel. We at B'nai Yeshurun are so honored to have Shulie with us this morning to take us on this virtual tour about Hanukkah. We will learn why the Hanukkah story is so significant, where the events took place, and what happens with the Hasmonean kingdom. The title of this talk is My Glorious Brothers, How Did the Hasmoneans Change Jerusalem and Judaism? Please join me in warmly welcoming Shulie Mishkin.
Thank you so much, Aviva. I will add that I have to update my bio. Thank God I'm not only doing virtual tours these days, I'm doing real tours. That was written during COVID, but we can do both. Okay, so hello, everybody. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to take a little journey through the story of the beginning of Hanukkah. Here we started our first night of Hanukkah an hour ago. You guys still have a few hours, but we are going to share the story of the Hasmonean and why Hanukkah is well, this is how I will start. Hanukkah is the most misunderstood Jewish holiday. On the one hand, a lot of people think of it, as the Jewish Christmas, certainly in America, not in Israel. But there's nothing serious when you get out of the religious world. There are no serious articles about Hanukkah. There was a recent New York Times opinion piece about giving up Hanukkah and seeing it as this bloodthirsty, revenge-driven fanaticism. Okay, so on the one hand, Hanukkah is very misunderstood, certainly in the diaspora. But on the other hand, I would say that it is the most important Jewish holiday. Pesach, I guess, would inch ahead, right? Pesach is probably more important than Hanukkah, but it is very much a close second. And certainly for monotheism in general, Hanukkah is the most important holiday. So why is it the most misunderstood, and why is it the most important? In one word, assimilation. Okay, Hanukkah fights assimilation, as we're going to see, the very powerful current of assimilation that was Hellenism, and fights back and keeps the Jewish spark alive. But Hanukkah is misunderstood because certainly in modern America, Hanukkah has often been assimilated out of existence and become something like the Jewish Christmas, and that's very ironic. So we're going to try to understand where is Hanukkah and what is the story going to be about. So just the picture here, of course, is one of the many, many menorahs that we have, that we've discovered in archaeology and Jewish art. The menorah, not the Magen David, not the Star of David, but the menorah is the classic Jewish symbol that goes back to temple times, to Second Temple times. certainly super important in Roman and Byzantine times, and even till today. This is a beautiful menorah from a synagogue in the southern Hebron Hills, displayed in the Israel Museum. And we're going to take a look at how archaeology can help us understand the story as well. So let's get started. So just a basic timeline review, because we want to understand when is the story taking place. Okay, so all of this is happening during Second Temple times, of course. So the Jews begin to return to Judea, what we call Shivat Zion, 538. The Persians are ruling. Cyrus is the emperor, and he allows people to return. Jews begin to return. We have something of a black hole in Jewish history. We don't know very much about this time period of Shivat Zion. We have here and there, that's a subject for another class, but really not as much as we would like. The next event that's going to be incredibly significant is 332. Alexander the Great sweeps out from Macedon, conquers not just Judea, but half of the known world, brings it under Greek control. Again, something of a black hole, that we don't know so much about what's happening in Judea after this conquest, although we have interesting legends and stories. But the next date that's going to be important for us is that one of the dynasties that comes out of Alexander's kingdom, the Seleucids. Okay, we're going to hear about the Seleucids and the Ptolemies. The Seleucids are the ones ruling over the land of Israel in the 2nd century before the Common Era. And Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, enacts decrees against Judaism and desecrates the temple. Okay, this is the beginning of the revolt, of course, that we know so well. Okay, the defeat of the Greeks, the purification of the Mikdash, the beginning of the sovereignty of the Hasmonean, 100 years, okay, almost exactly 100 years of Hasmonean sovereignty, of Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. That's essentially the end of Jewish rule in the land of Israel, except for a very short blip during Bar Kokhba times, up until 1948. So this begins with Judah Maccabee and the story of the Hasmonean. We're going to talk about the dynasty and who rules. Yochanan Hyrcanus is a great expander of the Hasmonean kingdom. He also converts the Edomites, and we're going to see that's very important for our story of Herod, who's going to come in here in the end. In the year 63, okay, 101 years later, the Romans are called in to end a civil war between two rival Hasmonean kings, and Roman rule begins. That kingdom. Father, are we good on here? Are you hearing me? Are you seeing me? You're not seeing me now. Great. Sorry. Why is that? Okay. Well, you can. Oh, and now you are
Not hearing you.
Hearing me. Okay, hold on. Okay, good. Are we back?
We're back.
We're back. Beautiful. Okay. Antipater, Herod's father, is appointed procurator, basically the governor, by Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar is murdered. We have the final Hasmonean king, Matityahu Antigonus, and then we have Herod. Okay, so just to give us a bigger picture of the timeline, we're going to come back to a lot of these different stories that we mentioned here. Okay, but let's start with Alexander. And Alexander the Great really does change the world. He comes from Macedon. He becomes king at the age of 20. He's the son of Philip of Macedon, and he does this incredible lightning military campaign. We'll see a map of it in a minute, how much he conquers, but basically going from the area of Macedon through North Africa, all the way to West Asia. In 10 years, he creates an unbelievable, enormous empire that reaches from Greece all the way to India. He's a very interesting individual. He's tutored by Aristotle in the Greek philosophic tradition. He's considered to be just the hero of the age. Adding to that mystique or heroism is the fact that he dies very young. He dies at age 33 as he's involved in all of these military campaigns. Judaism has an interesting approach to Alexander. On the one hand, maybe a lot of people probably know people named Alexander, or maybe not today, but certainly for a couple of generations ago, it was definitely considered to be a very normative Jewish name. We have some amazing stories in the Midrash about Alexander. Alexander meeting Shimon HaTzadik and acknowledging his holiness, saying that he sees him, an image of him before he goes into battle, right? He's seen to be very wise. But on the other hand, there's stories in the Gemara where he's not so wise, right? He's very greedy. He wants to outsmart everybody. So he's an interesting character in Jewish legend, but there is no denying that he changes the world very, very significantly. And here you have just an idea of his empire starting out here in Macedon and going and conquering, going to the east, taking this whole area of what we call Asia Minor, Turkey of today, going towards Armenia, going all the way towards Western Asia, as well as part of North Africa, of Egypt, a massive kingdom. But again, he dies very young. After his death, his kingdom is sliced up between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. In the beginning, the Ptolemies, who are based in Egypt, rule over the land of Israel, over Judea. But by the time of our story of Hanukkah, we have the Seleucids, the Syrian Greeks coming from the north, and they're ruling over us. So that's just to give us an idea of what we're talking about. But what's more important than the various successors and dynasties is the power of the idea of Hellenism. Okay, we mentioned Alexander is tutored by Aristotle. He's a Greek philosopher. He's a philosopher king, a philosopher warrior. And he helps to spread Hellenism. Now, what is Hellenism? What does it mean? A Hellenist is originally, the meaning is one who speaks Greek. What we have is, along with this huge military conquest, you have soldiers who are coming from Greece. They are settling in all the places that have been conquered. They are mixing with the locals, and they're creating a very interesting hybrid of Greek language and Greek culture, but also local culture and local gods, intermarriage, right? And just kind of sweeping away everything that was there before. So for example, in our area, right, in the land of Israel, Judea and Phoenicia to the north of us, and this is from pictures from the Sidonian caves in Maresha, in Beit Guvrin in Judea, but this is a place that was ruled over by Phoenicians coming from the north, from Lebanon. In our area, you have very much this strong adoption of Greek ideas, of Greek customs, of Greek gods. So for example, what is this? This is a burial cave. Okay? It's a burial cave that was unearthed about 100 years ago with the original paintings inside. It was made by Phoenicians, Sidonians, okay, it's called the Sidonian cave. Now, the Phoenicians had their own local gods. They worshiped the Baal like the other Canaanites, okay? But once the Hellenists come along, once they conquer them, they basically take over wholesale Greek gods, Greek mythology, and that's what you're seeing on the walls. You're seeing real animals, but you're also seeing all kinds of mythical animals. What's the myth? The myth is Greek myths, right? Take a look at the picture here on the right. This is Cerberus, the three-headed dog who guards the gates to hell, right? This is a Greek idea. And all of our local groups, whatever was left of the Philistines, of the Assyrians, of the Canaanites, they all kind of gung-ho, wholesale take on this new Greek culture. This is what's in, this is what's hot, this is what everybody is doing in the name of modernity and of progress. And cities become Hellenized, right? We call them polis, right? A polis has certain elements of material culture, right? A Greek style marketplace, a paved street, the language is Greek, the trades and the coins, all of it is taking place with the Greek money. Right? You have sports and the gymnasium. All of these material cultures, as well as spiritual things, logic, reasoning, literary style, the idea that you can be a citizen and have self-government, okay? All of this is taking over the cities all over Alexander's empire, and in addition, in the land of Israel as well. So we have two cities here, which we know in Hebrew as Akko and Yafo, but they become Ptolemais and Joppa. Okay, they are ruled by the Greeks. Eventually, they're going to be conquered by the Hasmoneans, but they become Greek polises. Another famous one, Skytopolis. Okay, a polis is a city. Skytopolis is the city of Beit Shan, which starts out on the tell, right on top of the hill, eventually expands, and then it becomes a very Greek and then a very Roman city. It becomes part of a league of 10 cities called the Decapolis, and in its urban planning, in its temples, in its gods, it is following Hellenistic ideas. Are Jews living in these cities? Of course, Jews are living in these cities. These are mixed cities. And we're going to see that the Hellenism comes not only to the mixed cities, but it comes to Jerusalem as well. Now, where does Judaism fit into this story, right? How do Jews feel about Hellenism? Now, anyone who knows anything about Jewish history knows that throughout history, Jews have connected to the culture that they are in. They adapt it, they change it, they use Jewish content to connect to that local culture, right? They take the outside of the local culture and they pour into it Jewish content. But what happens with Hellenism is something very interesting, something very frightening. You have extreme Hellenizers who want to become Greek in every way, right? And they want to become Greek in terms of their not having circumcision, right? The body is perfect. Why should we damage the body in any way? And to be involved in sports and to give up any kind of Jewish distinctiveness. That's the extreme. And we're going to see that that's what the Maccabees, that's what the Hasmoneans fight against. But most Jews, and certainly even till today, and the Maccabees themselves, choose some form of synthesis. And Chazal say it best. They take the pasuk in the Torah, Yaft Elokim liyefet v'yishkon be'ohalei Shem. And the Gemara in Megillah says this means that you take the beauty of Yefet. Yefet is the symbol of the Greeks, and you put it in the tents of Shem. Shem is us, the Jews. You take the Greek form, literature, philosophy, legal codes, wisdom literature, and you put within it Jewish content, Jewish values. So we have so many different ideas from material culture. Okay, what you see on the right here, this is a living room in the house of Kohanim in Jerusalem, and it's set up exactly like a Greek and later a Roman triclinium, a Roman living room is going to look. Okay, you have legal documents that are based on Greek ideas, okay, like the Ketubah. You have political institutions like the Sanhedrin that are based on Greek ideas. You have social gatherings that are based on Greek ideas. The most powerful example is something that we do every single year, and it's called the Pesach Seder, and it's based on the Greek symposium. Okay? The idea that you sit around a gathering of people, many courses, lots of cups of wine, a formal discussion. Now you'll say, okay, but the Seder has holiness to it. Seder has Jewish content to it. Of course, it's taking that outside Hellenistic garb and it's filling it with Jewish ideas. But the question is, what would have happened if, we're going to see in a moment, Antiochus is going to decree against the Jews? What if he hadn't decreed? What if it had all been very polite and very tolerant? Would we have slowly slipped into complete Hellenism because it was very comfortable and very easy? Or would there at some point been a showdown between the two worldviews of Yefet and of Shem, of Hellenism and of Judaism? It's a very interesting what if question that we don't have to deal with because Antiochus does decree against us. But just to swing back and forth for a minute, to swing into the story of archaeology for a moment, every year around this time, different places publicize some find that they discovered that connects to the story of Hanukkah. And they don't discover it like a minute before Hanukkah. They usually have discovered it a few months ago, but they save it for the newspaper for Hanukkah. So whether it's arrowheads with Antiochus's symbol on them or coins that were discovered from the time of the Maccabees in a hideout cave, that was this year's discovery. There's a lot of archaeology that connects to our story. And this is one of these pieces. In the book of Maccabees, we have a story about a guy named Heliodorus who was sent by the king Seleucus IV, the brother of Antiochus, to get money from the temple, right? And he's coming. The temple, of course, is a huge treasury, and he's coming to the temple. And what happens? Okay, take a look at the verses here in the book of Maccabees. There appeared to them a richly caparisoned horse mounted by a fearsome rider, charging furiously. The horse attacked Heliodorus. The rider was seen wearing golden armor. He fell to the ground. They carried away helpless the man who a moment before had entered that treasury under arms with a great retinue and his whole bodyguard. So basically what happens is Heliodorus is sent to plunder the temple, but the temple is protected by angels, however you want to look at it, that's what the book of Maccabees says. An inscription was discovered. One part of it was discovered in a cave in that very same Tel Marisha that we looked at before, in a dig that's done by amateurs called Dig for a Day. And another piece was discovered on the antiquity market, and a very sharp-eyed archaeologist put the two pieces together. And this is an inscription that talks about this guy, okay? A guy named Olympodorus, who's in charge of all the Kohanim in our region, and Heliodorus sends him to collect money from the temple. So it's just another great example of these stories are very, very much rooted in reality, rooted in the archaeology. Let's go back to Antiochus. Okay, so Antiochus the third is tolerant of the Jews. Antiochus the fourth comes to power. And the Jews attempt to revolt against him while he's in Egypt, and he returns and he puts down the revolt and he institutes anti-Jewish decrees. Now, this is actually a fascinating thing. We have had enemies before Antiochus IV, right? We have the Assyrians, we have the Babylonians, but this is the first time that an enemy actually institutes decrees against the Torah. Okay, we are going to see this, unfortunately, over and over and over again in Jewish history, but this is the first time. The Babylonians don't do this. The Assyrians don't do this. The Greeks, Antiochus IV is the first one who institutes anti-Jewish decrees. He's helped along by these extreme Hellenizers who say, well, let's get rid of all this extra, we don't need all this Judaism, we don't need all this distinctiveness. Let's become different. Let's become special. We have a lot of remnants, archaeological remnants of Antiochus IV. Here's a coin of his on the left. On the right, these are arrowheads that were discovered actually in Jerusalem that have his symbol on them. And he comes to Jerusalem and he establishes himself in Jerusalem. He builds a tower. We know about this from the book of Maccabees and from Josephus, called the Akra. The very big question in archaeology of Jerusalem where this is. There are many suggestions. On the left, you have an image from the Cholda Gates, from the southern wall of the Temple Mount. This was a suggestion that this was where the Akra was. So far, we have nothing to prove that it was. A few years ago, excavators in the city of David claimed that they had discovered the foundations of the Akra, and that's actually where they found these arrowheads. But this is what you can see here on the right, the foundations that they discovered today. They're not 100% sure. It's still somewhat of a mystery where the Akra is, but is definitely undisputable that Antiochus comes and establishes his power in Jerusalem. And then, and this is where we hear in the book of Maccabees, we have these anti-Jewish decrees, which it's very clear from the book of Maccabees that this is not only from Antiochus, but this is from the Jews as well. Okay, and this is what you have here in the very beginning of the book of Maccabees. We have a few books of Maccabees. This is the first one. In those days went out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are around about us. Right? Let's join with these non-Jews. Okay, so what did they do? This is the bold here. They built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen. Okay, what did they do? They made a gymnasium, something that is very, very Greek and not particularly Jewish, and made themselves uncircumcised, right? They were circumcised, but they were what's called moshechet hamilah. They covered up their circumcision and forsook the Holy Covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief. And we know that some of these people were actually Kohanim. Okay, now continuing later on the chapter, moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people. Now, this is very interesting. Why does he want to do this? He doesn't say that he is anti-Semitic. He's not anti-Judaism. He is universal. All right, this is very beautiful. We all should be connected. We all should be part of one nation. Why do you want to be different? And this is always one of the attacks of anti-Semites on Judaism. Why do you want to be different? Why do you want to separate yourselves? Let's all be one. So what should we do? Everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. And many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. Okay? And the king sent letters and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifices, and they should profane the Sabbath and pollute the sanctuary, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, sacrifice swine's flesh, leave their children uncircumcised, etc., etc., etc. And whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said, he should die. All right. So now we're getting a little away from the nice, universal, progressive, and now we're becoming very coercive. And that's where we get to the small group that says, no, we're not interested in this. In the beginning, when we have just this kind of internal battle between the extreme Hellenizers and the more moderate and the Jews who are against Hellenizing, there's not a battle. But once Antiochus really makes these decrees, then there is a small group led, of course, by Matityahu and his sons, who decide that this enough is enough, and they are going to rebel. And this is where we have the book of Maccabees, the 2nd chapter. In the meanwhile, the king's officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came into the city of Modi'in to make them sacrifice. And when many of Israel came into them, Matityahu also and his sons came together and answered the king's officers and said to Matityahu in this way, you are a ruler and an honorable and great man in the city, strengthened with sons and brethren. You come first and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done, and the men of Judah and such as remain in Jerusalem. And then you and your house be in the number of the king's friends, and you and your children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards, right? This is a classic tactic. We're going to take the leader. If the leader can capitulate, then we'll, of course, reward him. Then everybody will follow. Then Matityahu answered and spoke with a loud voice, through all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him, and fall away everyone from the religion of their fathers, and give consent to his commandments. Yet will I and my sons and my brothers walk in the covenant of our fathers. And that's it. And that's the opening shot, right? In this rebellion, we will not acquiesce to following your customs. We are going to keep to the covenant of our fathers. Now, where is all this taking place, right? Where is Modi'in? We have it very clearly in the text that it's happening in Modi'in. Where is Modi'in? We hear about Modi'in in our sources. Probably the most famous thing besides the story of Hanukkah that happens in Modi'in is when we talk in the Gemara about bringing Korban Pesach, right? Bringing the Passover sacrifice. Talks about who is not obligated to bring, right? Who is considered to be far away and therefore can come on the second Passover on Pesach Sheni. And it talks about a place called Modi'in, Minha Modi'in Bahala. If you are at Modi'in or beyond, that's already too far. You don't have to go all the way to Jerusalem. Okay, that seems to be about a half a day's journey from Jerusalem. Now, are we talking about modern Modi'in? Are we talking about something near modern Modi'in? Right? We have a few possibilities. So the picture here on the left is an Arab town called Al-Medya. Media Modi'in. It sounds right. It sounds like it's about in the right area. It fits nicely. However, we haven't done any archaeology there, so we don't know. What about in the modern Modi'in of today? A lot of people, I'm sure, are familiar with modern Modi'in, northwest of Jerusalem, big Jewish city, one of the newest of all, probably the newest city in the land of Israel, in the state of Israel, founded only about 25, 30 years ago. Okay. In Modi'in, we have a few archaeological sites. One is called Givat Titura. Okay, we have a mikveh there, but we don't have any ancient village. But on the western edge of Modi'in, we have a site that's called El Umdan, and that's what you're seeing over here. And this seems to be our best possibility. We have coins from the time of Antiochus. We have remains of a village. So chances are very good that El Umdan, which is in the confines of Modi'in of today, is our ancient Modi'in. And if you live in Israel and you want to go on a little tiyul on Hanukkah, there definitely are tiyulim that are taking place on Hanukkah there. And the battles begin. Now, a very nice and easy way to remember the battles, we're going to look at them here on the map, but a nice and easy way to remember them is to think of a Chanukiah, of a Hanukkah menorah. Right? Hanukkah menorah has 4 branches and the shamash in the middle. That is how the battles work. We have 4 battles that take place, and then we have another 4 battles in the middle. You have the Jews are coming to Jerusalem and purifying the temple, meaning when Judah Maccabee comes to the temple, and we have the story of the menorah and the story of the oil and the purification, that's not the end of the story. That's only halfway. Okay, 4 battles have happened. Another 4 are going to happen. But in the middle, there's enough of a respite that they can go and they can purify the Mikdash and they can light the menorah. So where are these battles taking place? Okay, is my annotating working here? Ma'ale Levona. Okay, is our first one, a little bit north of Shiloh. Okay, our second one is a place called Beit Horon, not so far from Modi'in. Okay, third one is in the area of the Ayalon Valley over here. Okay, actually, I should be doing this on the map, would be better. The Ayalon Valley and Emmaus. The fourth one in Beit Sur, in south of Gush Etzion of today. Then they come to Jerusalem, okay? And then we have an additional 4 battles. Okay, we have one in Beit Zachariah, okay, right around here by Elazar, okay, Elazar of today. We have one in Kfar Shalem, okay, which is to the north of Jerusalem in Giv'on. We have one by Hadashah, by Beit Horon again, okay, over here. And finally, we have one by El Asa, by Mount Baal Hatzor, and this is where Judah Maccabee is killed. So in case you didn't follow all of it, don't worry. Basically, our story is taking place in the Judean hills, in the area of Binyamin, north of Jerusalem, as well as down here in the Ayalon Valley, okay? That's where the story is taking place. It's not taking place in the north, in the Galilee, or in the Negev, because those areas are not under Jewish control yet. We're going to see that the Hasmonean expand Jewish control to those areas, but Judea is a pretty small place in the time of the story of Hanukkah, and that's where the story is taking place, in Judea and in Binyamin, okay, in the mountains of Judah and the mountains of Binyamin. So we have a few places that are important to the story. One of them is a place called Mitzpah. You might be familiar with Mitzpah from Tanakh. We hear about Mitzpah. It's the place where Bnei Israel gather in the time of Shmuel to go out to battle against the Plishtim. It's also the place where they gather and they crown Shaul to be the very first king. Okay, Yehuda Maccabee, who's very aware of Jewish history, gathers his troops at Mitzpah as well, and they pray there, just like they prayed there in the time of Sefer Shmuel. Okay, and that's what you have here in the book of Maccabees. The Israelites assembled themselves and came to Mitzpah over against Jerusalem, for Mitzpah was the place where they prayed before in Israel, and this is where they prayed before they set out to battle in Emmaus, down in the valley. Where is Mitzpah? So there are different suggestions. Most scholars today think it's a place that is just to the north of Jerusalem. Today it's right outside of Ramot, and it's called Nebi Samuel. Why do we think it's Mitzpah? Because the word Mitzpah, from the word litzpot, right? Or sofeh, like Har HaTzofim. It means it's a place that's high up, that you can see everything all around you. And Nebi Samuel fits that definition perfectly, because it is very high up. It's almost 1,000 meters above sea level. You have a beautiful view from there of Jerusalem. It also looks down on major roads. It's a very, very strategic and important place. And that's where we think Judah Maccabee is. Meanwhile, the Greeks are camped down in the valley at a place that was called Emmaus. Today, it's in the area called Park Canada, beautiful JNF Park right near Latrun. But it was a city with hot springs. Emmaus is kind of a Greek way of saying chamat, as in chamei something, right? The hot springs. The Greeks are there. The Jews are on the mountain. The Jews come down, battle the Greeks in Emmaus, and manage to defeat them. Later on, it becomes a very important Jewish city and then a Roman city. That's the picture over here you have of a very perfect Roman bathhouse. Okay, Jews are living in the city, but they're using this Roman bathhouse. Again, we're going to see Hellenism doesn't go away too far. And things like the culture of the bathhouse definitely stay part of the Jewish experience. But halfway through these battles, we've got 4 battles, and then there's a little bit of breathing space. Judah Maccabee is able to go to Jerusalem. There's kind of an upset in the Seleucid kingdom. The general has to go back, and Judah is able to take his troops and to go to Jerusalem. Where is he? He's just finished his battle in Beit Sur, right? In Beit Sur, down here in the southern part of Gush Etzion. So he has to go north towards Jerusalem. How is he traveling to Jerusalem? He's traveling on a road that is still around today, and that's called the Path of the Patriarchs, or Derech HaAvot. It's an ancient road that goes back to the time of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but it's a major pilgrimage road in Second Temple times, and that's why we have a huge mikvah, actually 2 huge mikvahot on this road, because people who would go up to the temple needed to purify themselves on the way. That's why later on, when the Romans fix up this road, they put Roman milestones there. That's the picture you have on the left here with this very cute young man and the Roman milestone. Does Judah the Maccabee go to purify himself, he and his men, in this mikvah on his way up to the Beit HaMikdash? Perhaps, right? It's a very fascinating thought, because here he is, he's been in battle, he's a warrior, he's shed blood. In order to go and purify the Mikdash, he himself has to become pure. So do Judah and his men use this mikvah? I have no proof yet, but it's a very nice thought. And they come to Jerusalem. They come in the month of Cheshvan, and it takes them a month to clean up the Mikdash and to get rid of the idolatry, and to set things up and be able to dedicate the temple anew. Okay, and here's where we get to 2 very different stories. And this is not the class to talk about this, but it is an interesting thing to notice. And this is something that many, many people talk about. The story in the book of Maccabees and the story that Chazal tell are 2 very different stories. Okay, take a look at the bottom source here. Now, on the 5th and 20th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Kislev, and don't mind the bad spelling, in the 148th year, they rose up in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made, right? They have to redo everything. They need a month to redo it. At what time and what day the heathen had profaned it, right? It's an anniversary of when the Greeks had desecrated the temple. Even in that day, it was dedicated. They do a Chanukat Habayit. That's where the word Hanukkah comes from. They rededicate the temple with songs and citerns and harps and cymbals, and the people fell upon their face, worshiping and praising God. Moreover, Judah and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days from the 5 and 20th day of the month of Kislev with mirth and gladness. Okay, so what do we have here? 25th of Kislev, dedication of the temple, 8 days. Very nice. What are we missing? The menorah. Okay, the menorah is not in this story. Why 8 days? Basically, because what they're doing is they're doing a reenactment of Sukkot, right? And they're doing a reenactment of Shlomo dedicating the temple. And 8 days is the amount of time that you do for a Chanukat Habayit, that you do for Sukkot. When we go to the story in Shabbat, in the Gemara Shabbat, which many people I'm sure are familiar with, we have a very different story. Look at the top paragraph. What is Hanukkah? The sages taught in Megillat Ta'anit on the 25th of Kislev. The days of Hanukkah are 8. One may not eulogize on them, one may not fast on them. When the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they defiled all the oils that were in the sanctuary. And when the Hasmonean monarchy overcame them and emerged victorious, they searched and found only 1 cruse of oil that was placed with the seal of the high priest. And there was sufficient oil to light the candelabrum for only 1 day. A miracle occurred and they lit for 8 days. The next year, the sages instituted those days and made them holidays, the recitation of Hallel and special Thanksgiving. What do we have here? We have the date, we have the 8 days, we have the menorah. What do we not have? Any kind of battle. Okay, so 2 very different emphases. Does it mean that that either story is complete? I think you need both stories together to tell the actual story. Each one emphasizes what's important to that text. Okay, lighting of the menorah definitely happens in the book of Maccabees. It's just not the emphasis at all. Now, what's our story with the olive oil? Why do we have to get pure olive oil? Olive oil, first of all, we have to have oil that is made bitahara. It has to be made in a purified manner by people who are pure. It cannot be made by pagans. And here we go again, back to our same Marisha, where you have an olive oil press. If you look, you can see that you have this nice little niche here. What went in there when they made the oil? This was a place for an idol. And just like we have yain nesach, where you pour out a little bit of wine to the god as you're making the wine, we have shemen nesach. They did the same thing. They poured out a little bit of oil to the god, to the idol, as they were preparing the oil. So it has to be prepared b'tahara, it has to be kept b'tahara, and that's what the Maccabees are missing when they come into the Mikdash. They have to get oil that is pure, it has to be made and kept in the right way. Now, very soon after the Maccabees take power, they decide to get rid of all of the symbols of Greek power, okay? They break down the Akra. They do not allow any Greek sovereignty, any Greek sign of power in Jerusalem. But not only that, they go south to Ramat Rachel, which is the picture that we have over here on the left, where there had been a foreign palace already in the time of the Assyrians. They dismantle it completely. They go to Nebi Samuel, where we have a whole living quarters that were here, Jews who were living here in the time of the Hellenized kingdom, and they destroy that as well. They say, we don't have to live outside of Jerusalem. We're going to move into Jerusalem. We're not going to be exiled anymore. No more foreign powers in Jerusalem or outside. No more exile from Jerusalem. We are moving back to Jerusalem. And we're going to see that in the time of the Hasmonean, they expand the city of Jerusalem. It grows and it becomes much more powerful. Now, just a little bit of a side note, where are the Maccabees buried, right? We hear in Josephus that you have this huge structure, right? This huge structure of all of the Maccabees. Where is it? Somewhere near Modi'in. In 1907, the Gymnasia Herzliya, which is the Hebrew high school in Tel Aviv, decided that there's a place right outside of the Ben Shemen forest, actually on the edge of in the Ben Shemen forest, that's called the Kivrot HaMaccabim. In 1945, they did a special race from there, the Maccabi race, which is what you're seeing the poster in here. Did they really know? Not necessarily, but today we've dug here and we know that there actually are graves that go back to the time of the Second Temple. A more spurious site is a site called Khirbet Gardi, which is in the forest and which up until recently was considered to be the grave of a Muslim sheikh. Today it's considered to be the grave, it's converted to be the grave of Matityahu Kohen Gadol, as you can see here. Not so clear if this is true, but people like to have graves to visit. Let's go back to Jerusalem. When the Hasmonean take power, they expand the city and it grows from being just the narrow city of David and the Temple Mount. It grows to encompass what's the Western Hill, the Jewish quarter of today. They rebuild the walls of the city, they fortify it. This is part of the wall on the bottom of Har Zion, of Mount Zion. This is part of a fortification by Migdal David. The city grows, just understand that for a second. Okay, the city, which before the story of the Hasmonean is this kind of a narrow little city, with the Hasmonean, it grows to encompass this whole area. Not as big as it's going to be at the end of Second Temple times, but definitely much bigger. Right? In order for such a big city to survive, you need to have more water. So the Hasmoneans build aqueducts that bring more water to the Temple Mount, that bring more water to the city, and they become a very powerful dynasty. So if we see, just take a look for a second, understand what we're talking about, because we're going to move into the consequences of the story of the Hasmonean. We start with Matityahu. We have our 5 sons, okay? Simon, Shimon, is the one who becomes the ruling power. Yehuda is killed. Okay, the others also do not succeed. Simon's son, Yochanan Hyrcanus, becomes the next ruler. After him, we have Alexander Yanai, okay, rules for a very long time, also very powerful. His wife, Shlomit Alexandra, then his brother Aristobulus. Then we have a civil war between Hyrcanus and Aristobulus, and the final king, Matityahu Antigonus, and then Herod. Okay, so that's just to give a sense. While you're here looking at these names, take a look. We go from Yochanan and Shimon and Yehuda and Eliezer and Yonatan to Hyrcanus, Alexander, Aristobulus, Antigonus. Okay, we're going to talk about that in 1 minute. The Hellenization of the Hasmonean, very ironically. But not only does Jerusalem expand, but the kingdom expands as well. Okay, if you look at the colors, you can see the palest color is the core of the kingdom at the time of the revolt. Okay, Yonatan expands, Yochanan Hyrcanus expands even more, and Alexander Yanai expands even more. So by the time we get to Alexander Yanai in the 1st century before the Common Era, we have the Golan, we have the Transjordan, we have the area of the Negev and of the coast, right? It becomes much, much bigger than it was before. Yochanan Hyrcanus conquers the south, and conquers a group called the Edomites, right? The Edumim, from Esav, from Edom. He offers them a very powerful choice. He says to them, you can either leave or you can convert, something that Jews did not do very often in Jewish history. And we're going to see that one of the converts is Herod's father. So Herod, in a way, is an outgrowth of the Hasmonean. But let's just go back to our Hasmonean for a moment. They become more and more wealthy, more and more powerful. Okay, they build fabulous palaces. Okay, this is what's left of the Hasmonean palaces out in Jericho. They become more Hellenized, as we saw with their names. Okay, some of them become more attracted to the Tzdukim, okay, to the people who reject the rabbinic interpretation of the law, and this is going to create many different unintended consequences. Okay, so just to kind of sum up where we've gotten to by this point, all right, we have the revolt against this very, very strong trend of Hellenism. We buck the trend. We're able to stop Hellenism, this juggernaut, from taking over everything in the land of Israel, everything in Judaism. The Hasmonean become kings, but their kingdom is very good. It expands Jerusalem, it expands the land of Israel, but at the same time, they themselves become more Hellenized, they themselves become more divided, and they become more wealthy. And this is going to lead us to a bunch of unintended consequences. One of the, they're all very significant, so I'm not going to say which is the most significant. One very unintended consequence is sectarianism. Okay, sectarianism meaning that by the 2nd century of before the Common Era, by the time of the story of Hanukkah, or right after the story of Hanukkah, we start to hear about different groups in Judaism, not just Hellenizers and anti-Hellenizers, but people who accept the authority of the rabbis, what we would call the Prushim, the Pharisees, and people who reject the authority of the rabbis, the Tzdukim, the Essenes. What does this have to do with the story of Hanukkah? What does this have to do with the Hasmonean? Well, certainly, and these are pictures from Qumran and from the people of the Dead Sea Scrolls in the story of the Essenes, they do not like the Hasmonean. They are very, very anti the idea that Kohanim can be warriors. How can you be a warrior and serve in the temple? You have blood on your hands. You shouldn't be able to serve in the temple. Not only that, they are not from the proper family of the Kohen Gadol. It's supposed to be from the family of Yehoiada, and they are the family of Yehoyariv. So they have blood on their hands. They're not from the right family. And not only that, they take on the kingship. Kohanim are not supposed to be kings. Only the house of David is supposed to be kings. So they are very against the Hasmonean, and they see the temple as having become completely corrupt and Hellenized, and therefore not legitimate. And they leave Jerusalem. Okay, the Tzdukim, on the other hand, they stay in Jerusalem, but the people of the Dead Sea Scrolls, they leave Jerusalem. They go out to the desert. They're going to wait it out until there's a proper rulership in Jerusalem, in the temple. And this is the beginnings of a very big split in Am Yisrael, which only ends because the temple is destroyed. But it begins with the Hasmonean and the fact that they are considered illegitimate by many other Jews. Okay, a second unintended consequence, and we kind of alluded to this before, King Herod. Okay? King Herod does many good things and many bad things. We could definitely see him as coming out of the story of the Hasmonean, both literally and on a kind of a deeper level. Literally, why? Take a look at what Josephus says about Herod's ancestry. There was a certain friend of Hyrcanus, an Idumean called Antipater, who was very rich, right? And in his nature, and active and a seditious man. Okay, Antipater is the father of Herod. He came from Maresha. He is one of these Edomites who converts when Yochanan Hyrcanus comes and says, everybody who doesn't want to abandon this place, if you convert, you can stay on. So Herod is a very complicated character. He has an Edomite father who converts to Judaism. He has a Nabatean and Arabian mother. Right? How close is he to Judaism? Interesting combination of influences. He rebuilds the Beit HaMikdash. He has mikvaot in some of his palaces, but on the other hand, he kills off many of the rabbis, and he does not have any great love for them. But he comes to power, not only is his birth because of the Hasmonean, but he comes to power because of the Hasmonean, because of this battle, this civil war that eventually brings the Romans in, and Herod becomes king because of the Romans. And this brings us to the unintended consequence number 3. Because Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus II cannot get along with each other, they call in the Romans to arbitrate. The Romans, once they're called in, they're not going to be so quick to leave. And Pompey in 63, before the Common Era, comes in, establishes control, collects taxes. Eventually, Herod is appointed as a client king, but the Romans are the guys who are in charge. So the Hasmonean, who start out in this very, very glorious way, in some ways are leading to the downfall of Judaism at the end of Bayit Sheni. But don't worry, we're going to rehabilitate them in a second. Hold on, because we did say that Hanukkah is the most important of our holidays. So what happens? The revolution that the Hasmonean start is a very, very significant revolution. Without it, who knows if Judaism would still exist? And without Judaism, there would be no Christianity, there would be no Islam. Monotheism may have left the world without the revolt of Matityahu and his sons. And they're standing up against this power of Hellenism. This tide of Hellenism is an incredibly important idea in human history. But they don't keep it going. And the ones who do keep it going are the rabbis. The rabbis eventually take the place of the Kohanim. Kohanim are still important in Judaism, but they are not the most important. And we can see that very clearly in the beginning of Pirkei Avot, where you have the chain of tradition. Moshe received the Torah at Sinai, transmitted to Joshua, Joshua to the elders to the prophets to the men of the great assembly. And then we get into the Tanaim, etc. Okay, who's missing in this chain? Kohanim. There are no Kohanim here. Okay? Kohanim are not part of the chain. The rabbis take them out. And if you want even better proof, go to the end of Pirkei Avot. Greater is learning Torah than the priesthood and then royalty. For royalty is acquired by 30 stages and the priesthood by 24, but the Torah by 48 things. Torah is a democracy. Anyone can learn Torah. You don't need to come from a particular family. In fact, some of the most famous of the rabbis are either coming from families of commoners, Amei Haaretz, or even from family of converts. And the rabbis take over this idea that the Hasmonean are not actually able to carry through to the end. Let's go back to our last, our question that we started with, which is Hellenism and Torah. Can they go together? And I brought you here 2 songs. Both of which I hope are somewhat familiar. One, of course, is the Ma'oz Sur, which many people here in Israel have already started to sing. People in America will sing tonight. Ma'oz Sur Yeshuati Lecha Na'eh L'Shabeach, right? Who is the focal point of the Ma'oz Sur? Hashem, right? We thank you, God. We're giving you our tefillah. We're giving you our korbanot, right? We're going to go to the Beit HaMikdash. The other side of the screen, the left side, is one of the many Hanukkah songs that were created with modern Zionism. And the song goes like this, and it's a very nice song, and you may have sung it many times, but pay attention to the words. Mi Yamalel Gvurot Yisrael. otan miyemne. Hein bechol dor yakum hagibor goel ha'am. Who's the hero of the song? The hero of the song is the person, right? The people, the heroes who are going to come along and are going to save Am Yisrael. We are going to save ourselves. We don't need this sewer. We don't need this deed from the outside that's going to come, or from the inside that's going to come and save us. This is very much a Hellenized idea. It's very ironic because it's a Hanukkah song, but it's believing in the power of the human hero as opposed to the power of the divine hero. And we have to figure out our path between these two. So I'm just going to finish by reading from an amazing book, an old book, but a great book by a scholar named Elias Bickerman, From Ezra to the Last of the Maccabees. And he ends his book in this way, and I'll read it to you. The Maccabees saved Israel from the Greek danger, but the danger was twofold. The Maccabees eradicated one kind of Hellenism only to facilitate the growth of another kind, right? And he goes on to talk about being Greek and acting Greek. Contact with the enlightened and universal culture of Hellenism could only be salutary for one who, wrestling as Jacob did with the angel, did not allow himself to be overcome, but extorted its blessing, not losing himself in Hellenism, but coming safely away with enhanced strength. The Jews succeeded because their knowledge of the oneness of God and of his worldview, the singular character of their faith, set up an inner barrier against surrender and separated them from the rest of the world. So how much Hellenism is too much? It's too much when we forget our distinctiveness, our uniqueness, and we forget the Ma'os Tzur. And we need to remember that in order for Hanukkah to continue to be important, or the second most important of all the holidays. So I did not stop, and I will now. If people have questions, if people have comments, I am so happy to hear.
Excellent.
Thank you. Anybody want to add anything? Anybody want to share anything?
Well, I have a
Hi,
question.
Shulie.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
Someone wanted to speak.
It's all right. I'll cede the floor. I'll go next.
Julie, I may have misunderstood what you said. I thought you indicated that the Jews revolted against Antiochus IV before he issued those decrees against the Jewish
We
religion.
had a little revolt, meaning a revolt for independence. It was put down very harshly. Okay, and again, we're not so clear, right? We don't know 100% from the Chronicles, but it seems that he's in Egypt. While the cat's away, the mice will play. The Jews say, maybe we could have some independence, but it's not a religious revolt. Antiochus comes back, crushes this attempt at independence, and then perhaps as a punishment begins to institute these decrees. Makes more sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Who else? B wanted to ask a question.
Yeah,
Hi,
hi,
Pete.
Shulie. I was wondering if a recording would be available, because someone who wasn't especially knowledgeable was asking me yesterday, and I went through as much as I knew, but I think she would benefit very much from.
Yeah, Aviva, there is a recording, correct?
Yeah, it's being recorded and it should be available on the Shul website on the adult education page within the next few days.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, I cannot give you the PowerPoint, sorry, but you'll see it. You'll see it as we go. That's my my intellectual property, sorry. All right, anybody else? Thank you, everyone. You should have a wonderful Hanukkah. And keep that Hanukkah spirit alive.
Thank you, Shulie, for a fascinating presentation, which combined both archaeology and history. Terrific. Thank you.
I'm glad.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shulie.
Many of you in Israel.